Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump declassifying assassination files. The records contain information surrounding the assassinations of the Kennedys and Martin Luther King Jr., why he's making the move, and what else is in his new batch of executive orders. Senate Democrats are opposing Trump's cabinet nominees, delaying the confirmation process for the president's national security team. A judge blocks Trump's plan to end birthright citizenship as Republicans introduce a bill to make it the law of the land. The birthright battle heats up. Multiple wildfires are raging across Southern California with thousands of residents under evacuation orders. Firefighters are working to contain the flames as strong winds and dry conditions fuel the danger.
This is NTD Evening News. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump signing a new batch of executive orders today, including one to declassify assassination files on the Kennedys. He's also issuing a blunt message to business leaders around the world. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. First, tell us about President Trump's new executive orders today.
Good evening to you as well, Tiff. So it's only day 4 of President Trump's new White House, and he's rolling out executive orders nonstop. On Thursday, he signed an executive order to release all records on the assassinations of former President John F. Kennedy, as well as former Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and also Dr. Martin Luther King. And he says in the order that to release them is for the American people to find out about the truth. Watch.
A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades. And everything will be revealed.
And after signing the order, he also asked his aide to give the pen that he signed the order with to RFK Jr., who was only a boy when his father got gunned down. While most of the files on the assassination attempt of former President John F. Kennedy have actually been released, Trump says it's important to release any remaining files on them as it's in the national interest. Meanwhile, Trump today also signed several other executive orders, including one, for example, to pardon 23 pro-life advocates who were arrested during a protest against abortion clinics, as well as another one to create a new council to advise him on new technologies. Tiff.
And Iris, President Trump today also laid out his tariff and economic plans to global business leaders. Tell us more about that part.
Sure. So President Trump earlier on Thursday addressed world economic leaders at a forum in Davos, and he basically told leaders around the world that the U.S. is a comeback and that is open for business. Watch.
Come make your product in America, and we will give you among the lowest taxes of any nation on earth. But if you don't make your product in America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff, differing amounts, but a tariff which will direct hundreds of billions of dollars and even trillions of dollars into our treasury.
And there you saw President Trump urging businesses around the world to come invest and do business in the U.S. while also threatening them with tariffs if they don't. And meanwhile, Trump also emphasized in another message, which is that the U.S. needs to have a fair relationship with China. Here's what he said. Watch.
All we want is fairness. We just want a level playing field. We don't want to take advantage. We've been having massive deficits with China.
And just earlier this week, Trump in the Oval Office said that he's considering a 10% tariffs on all Chinese goods, and that's to hold China accountable for it allowing fentanyl to be flown into Mexico and Canada and ultimately into the U.S. Back to you.
All right, Iris, thanks for those updates. The Senate confirms Trump's second cabinet pick and tees up potential weekend votes. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has the latest on the confirmation process for Trump's cabinet nominees.
This Thursday, the Senate's respective committees approved the nominations of Lee Selden to be the next director of the EPA, Chris Wright to be the next Secretary of Energy, and Doug Burgum to be the next Secretary of Interior. All three nominations will now move to the Senate floor for a full vote. Democrats opposed in committee all three nominations, citing concerns over Project 2025 and abortion rights.
Among my concerns, overturning VA's interim final rule on abortion and further privatizing of the VA care.
Now, you know, we all know that a good number of Donald Trump's nominees are very, very troubling. But this guy is he's probably at the very top of the list in terms of how dangerous he is to working people and to America. Mr. Vote is the godfather of the ultra-right.
Despite opposition from Democrats this Thursday, the Senate confirmed John Ratcliffe to be the next director of the CIA. Mr. Ratcliffe, during his confirmation hearings, vowed to increase the CIA's covert operations targeting Chinese Communist Party officials.
We will produce insightful, objective, all-source analysis, never allowing political or personal biases to cloud our judgment or infect our products. We will conduct covert action at the direction of the president, going places no one else can go and doing things no one else can do.
I, John Ratcliffe. Shortly after being confirmed on the Senate floor, John Ratcliffe was sworn in as the new director of the CIA. Senate Majority Leader John Thune has now teed up Pete Hegseth to be the next nominee to receive a full vote on the Senate floor.
Democrats have vowed to oppose the nomination of Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, citing allegations of excessive drinking and sexual abuse. Pete Hegseth's nomination passed a procedural vote on Thursday on party lines. Senators Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins were Republican defectors.
But unless I can point to specific firsthand corroborated testimony, I'm not going to cave to pressure. I'm going to vote for his confirmation.
This is just the Democrats doing what they're doing. They're obstructing Trump putting together a team. Trump won the election. He won the electoral vote. He won the popular vote. He needs to be able to put his team together, and the Democrats are being obstructions.
This Thursday, Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska published a statement indicating that she would vote against the confirmation of Pete Hegseth to be the next Secretary of Defense. Lisa Murkowski cited sexual abuse allegations and excessive drinking allegations for her reasoning to vote against Peter Hegseth. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
A judge blocks President Trump's plan to end automatic citizenship for anyone born in the U.S. as Republicans seek to turn it into the law of the land. The birthright battle heats up. Here's the story.
To hear the judge from the bench say that in his 40 years as a judge, he has never seen something so blatantly unconstitutional.
Federal Judge John Kulner temporarily blocks President Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship for the children of illegal immigrants. Birthright citizenship generally means anyone born in the United States is automatically a U.S. citizen, largely seen as part of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Washington State Attorney General Nick Brown says the amendment would have to be changed to end birthright citizenship.
Not even the President of the United States can simply erase what it means to amend the Constitution and the process therein.
Changing a constitutional amendment would be extremely difficult, but Republicans don't think they have to. Republican Brian Babbitt has introduced a bill to end birthright citizenship.
Citizenship will be granted only to children born in the United States with at least one parent who is, 1, a U.S. citizen or national, number 2, a lawful permanent resident, and number 3, a lawful resident who is serving in the military.
Republicans believe the 14th Amendment doesn't automatically give citizenship to anyone born in the U.S. The amendment says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. Republicans point specifically to the requirement, subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
A person in the United States illegally are not subject to the jurisdiction thereof, because that's what the 14th Amendment says. They got no Social Security number. They got no voter registration.
Republicans say they're confident their interpretation will win in court.
A lot of lower courts have to look at him, disagree, and then they're filed with the U.S. Supreme Court in order to make a decision. So, I mean, it could be upwards to a year. Who really knows?
Immigration lawyer Rosanna Berardi says she believes immigrants don't have to worry. At the moment, she says there will be a long period of political banter.
Clients are worried. We're getting a lot of phone calls. People don't know what's going to happen. They're worried about their applications. They're worried about traveling.
Hundreds of protesters gathered in Los Angeles and Las Vegas to protest ending birthright citizenship.
It's a very scary time with this new administration, and I want to make sure that our immigrant community, our Latino community, that everybody knows that they're not alone.
Protesters say many are scared of Trump's policies and that they hope the power of the people will stop them.
President Trump reacted to the judge's ruling, saying he would appeal. Here's what he said to reporters at the White House today.
No, obviously we'll appeal it. They put it before a certain judge in Seattle, I guess, right? And there's no surprises with that judge.
Earlier today, Trump's Justice Department said it would vigorously defend the executive order. A spokesperson said, quote, "We look forward to presenting a full merits argument to the court and to the American people who are desperate to see our nation's laws enforced." Crews are battling multiple new wildfires across California, while tens of thousands of residents evacuate. Strong winds and dry heat are fueling the flames, but rain expected this weekend could offer some relief to fire-prone communities. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
The latest wildfire to hit California is the Hughes Fire, which ignited Wednesday near Castaic Lake. The fire quickly spread across more than 10,000 acres, leading to mandatory evacuations for over 31,000 residents. 23,000 residents are under evacuation warnings. Authorities have reported no structure damage or injuries so far. As of Thursday evening, the fire is 14% contained. Meanwhile, the Laguna Fire ignited Thursday morning near CSU Channel Islands in Camarillo, spanning about 50 acres. Favorable conditions allowed firefighters to attack the fire from the air, with ground crews mitigating potential risks to structures. The Laguna Fire is 0% contained. The Palisades Fire is now 72% contained, and the Eaton Fire is 95% contained. This brings relief to the affected communities since the fires first ignited on January 7th. As recovery efforts begin, California lawmakers passed a set of bills Thursday to expedite $2.5 billion in bridge funding for state and local agencies. Lawmakers in both chambers approved the bills unanimously during an extended special session. Governor Gavin Newsom is expected to sign the bills and release the money quickly. But the National Weather Service has warned of elevated wildfire conditions due to strong wind gusts and single-digit humidity. Winds reaching 60 miles per hour are expected in parts of Southern California, with the red flag warning extended until 10 a.m. Friday. A quarter to half an inch of rain is expected this weekend. To reduce landslide risk, the city of Los Angeles is offering free sandbags. Residents interested can visit emergency.lacity.gov for locations. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Coming up, gunfire erupts in the Gaza Strip as the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas enters its 5th day. Meanwhile, Israel raises concerns about its ceasefire with Hezbollah, which is set to expire soon. Jason Perry reports. Russia now responds to a warning President Trump directed toward Moscow yesterday. That's as the head of NATO says he agrees with Trump on the strategic importance of Greenland. Arian Pozdar has the Russia update. Marco Rubio is making his first trip abroad as Secretary of State next week. He's starting off in Panama, as Trump has called for the U.S. to take back control of the Panama Canal, a waterway he says has fallen into the hands of the Chinese regime. And families in France are suing TikTok, claiming its algorithm exposes teenagers to videos promoting self-harm and suicide. That and more after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. As the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas holds for a 5th day, gunfire erupts in parts of the Gaza Strip. This comes as Israel is raising concerns about its ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is set to expire soon. NTD's Jason Perry brings us the latest.
A firefight broke out around this broken-down humanitarian aid truck in the Gaza Strip on Thursday. Gunshots could be heard as men dressed in black, some of whom were armed, were seen running around the area and taking cover. These women and children took cover here before running away when they thought it was safe. It was not immediately clear who was shooting at whom and why, although trucks carrying aid into Gaza have become scenes of commotion since the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas began on Sunday. Israeli forces also reported firing shots in several areas of the Gaza Strip on Thursday. They reported firing at armed individuals who posed a threat and also firing warning shots toward suspects who were approaching Israeli troops. Israel said they acted in accordance with the ceasefire agreement. Meanwhile, Israel's ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon is set to expire on Monday. This comes as Israeli troops continue finding weapon storage facilities in southern Lebanon.
Significant quantities of weapons were located within civilian areas. These included various weapons such as small arms, Cornet anti-tank missile launchers with a stand, 60mm mortars, small arms, RPGs, rockets, and additional weapons used by the enemy in attempts to harm our troops.
Under the ceasefire deal, Hezbollah and Israel are both supposed to withdraw from southern Lebanon to allow the Lebanese army and the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, or UNIFIL, to provide security there.
Just today, we discussed the ceasefire agreement with Lebanon. We've made clear that there have been positive movements where the Lebanese army and UNIFIL have taken the place of Hezbollah forces, as stipulated in the agreement. We've also made clear that these movements have not been fast enough, and there is much more work to do.
Hezbollah said in a statement that any breach of the ceasefire agreement with Israel would be unacceptable. Meanwhile, some residents have already begun returning to their homes in southern Lebanon, with Lebanese troops seen in the area.
We do not regret what happened at all. Everything can be compensated for, and we are used to this. It is not the first time this has happened. In every war, this is what happens, and thank God.
According to the ceasefire agreement, Israel needs to be completely out of southern Lebanon by Sunday. Jason Perry, NTD News.
President Trump today again saying Russia and Ukraine should strike a deal soon to end the war. This comes as Russia responds to a warning Trump directed towards Moscow yesterday. NTD's international correspondent Ariane Pazdar has the Ukraine update.
Millions of soldiers are being killed.
President Trump on Thursday addressing the World Economic Forum via video call. Heads of state, business leaders and others are in Switzerland to attend the annual gathering. Trump repeated calls for Russia and Ukraine to end the fighting.
Efforts to secure a peace settlement between Russia and Ukraine are now hopefully underway. It's so important to get that done. That is an absolute killing field.
According to the president, the conflict has become one of the deadliest since World War II.
They're laying dead all over the flat fields. It's a flat field farmland, and there's millions of Russians and millions of Ukrainians. Nobody's seen anything like it since World War II.
Just one day prior, Trump sent a warning to Russia, saying, if we don't make a deal soon, I have no other choice but to put high levels of taxes, tariffs and sanctions on anything being sold by Russia. The Kremlin responded to Trump's comments on Thursday.
We do not see any particularly new elements here. During his first presidency, Trump was the American president who, more often than anyone else, resorted to the methods of sanctions.
But Ukraine, on the other hand, supports Trump's warning to Russia. The Ukrainian foreign minister commented while attending the meeting in Switzerland.
It was really strong message and strong signal. We need USA leadership. We need more engagement of USA.
And NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is also in Davos on Thursday. He defended Trump after being asked if he's concerned the US might invade Greenland.
No, he didn't say that he is going to invade Greenland. Nobody said that. What he said is we have to make sure that the Arctic is of a huge geopolitical interest and we have to get our act together. And clearly he's right here.
Trump has proposed the idea of purchasing Greenland from Denmark. He says that's needed to protect America's national security by deterring foreign nations from increasing their military presence there. The NATO chief says he agrees with Trump.
How to make sure that we have a holistic strategy on the Arctic and that we fend off the Russians and the Chinese.
He added that multiple NATO member nations should work together to increase their presence in the Arctic. Ariane Pastar, NTD News.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio is heading to Central America next week. It comes as the Trump administration is working to stem illegal immigration and Chinese Communist Party influence in the region. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more from the State Department.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio will travel to Central America and the Caribbean next week as his first trip abroad as top U.S. diplomat. Now, Rubio is expected to meet with leaders in Panama, Guatemala, El Salvador, and the Dominican Republic. Now, this comes as President Trump has said that he wants the U.S. to take back control of the Panama Canal, one of the world's most critical waterway trade routes. The U.S. government built and operated the canal in the early 20th century, and under President Jimmy Carter, control of this waterway was handed over to the Panamanian government. Trump reiterated during his inauguration speech that Chinese entities related to the Chinese Communist Party are now operating the canal.
We have been treated very badly from this foolish gift that should have never been made, and Panama's promise to us has been broken. The purpose of our deal and the spirit of our treaty has been totally violated. American ships are being severely overcharged and not treated fairly in any way, shape, or form, and that includes the United States Navy. And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back.
Secretary Rubio has repeatedly said and reiterated during his confirmation hearing that the Chinese Communist Party is America's biggest adversary. After that hearing, he received unanimous support from the Senate.
The Communist Party of China leads the PRC, is the most potent and dangerous near-peer adversary this nation has ever confronted. They have elements that the Soviet Union never possessed.
Rubio's trip comes as President Trump has made ending mass illegal immigration to the U.S. as a top priority. Many illegal immigrants in the U.S. pass through the Darien Gap, then Panama, making their way up through the southern border. Now, Rubio is likely to discuss this in meetings in Panama. Last year, the U.S. and Panamanian governments signed an agreement to stem the tide of illegal immigration along the Darien Gap. Reporting from the State Department, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Families in France are suing TikTok, claiming its algorithm exposes teenagers to videos promoting self-harm and suicide. Among the plaintiffs is Stephanie Mistre, who says her daughter Marie died by suicide after encountering such material on the platform. NTD's international correspondent David Vivez has the story from Paris.
Marie really was a radiant young girl, full of life and funny. She wanted to make people laugh, but also had a strong personality.
3 years ago, Stephanie found the body of her daughter in her room. Her 15-year-old daughter, Marie, chose to take her life. She left a series of videos explaining why she did it, including difficulties at schools, online harassment, and content found on TikTok. Stephanie Mistre today is leading a lawsuit against TikTok France. Mistre blames the platform for promoting harmful content, including videos on self-harm and suicide methods, through its algorithm.
3 years ago, I had no idea what kind of content social platforms were pushing towards my daughter. If I had imagined that the content had to do with child sexual abuse, rape, physical violence, violence in general, ways of killing oneself and promoting suicide, and she already had limits on her screen time, I would have never given my blessing for this application.
The lawsuit filed by Mistre and 6 other families accuses TikTok of failing to moderate harmful material and alleges its algorithm traps vulnerable users in cycles of despair to maximize engagement. Of the 7 families involved, 2 lost their children to suicide. In response to the lawsuit, TikTok says it prohibits content promoting self-harm and suicide and employs 40,000 moderators globally, including French speakers, to remove such material. The company also said it refers users who search for suicide-related videos to mental health services. However, critics argue that TikTok's moderation falls short. Studies have shown that harmful content can reach young users within minutes of joining the platform. Grégoire Borst, a professor of psychology, emphasizes the need for stricter age verification tools.
A real tool to assess the age of the users. And that's really something that we need to kind of push forward. It's not acceptable that basically there are even children under 13 years of age who are massively using those social media. I mean,
some members of parliament, including senators, have already issued legal warnings to TikTok, urging the platform to modify its algorithm and comply with authorities. However, a total ban of the application could only be enacted by the EU Commission in Europe. Even though TikTok is under scrutiny by EU authorities, experts believe that achieving a total ban would be difficult, as it would require the agreement of all member states. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Coming up, President Trump's executive order limiting birthright citizenship takes center stage. A trial attorney joins us to break down the case and its implications. Senate Republicans respond to Democrats for opposing the Abortion Survivors Act. Jason Blair reports from the Capitol. Starting on Friday, federal agencies will mandate workers to come back to working in office full time. We hear from folks in D.C. about the president's decision. And phone-free classrooms. New York Governor Kathy Hochul announcing a proposal with bipartisan support. Chris Spears reports after the break. Welcome back. If you're just joining us now, here's some today's top headlines. President Trump signed an executive order releasing additional government files on the assassinations of former President John F. Kennedy, former Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. John Ratcliffe was sworn in as CIA director after the Senate voted 74-25 to confirm him. This marks Trump's second nominee to win Senate approval. A new wildfire called the Hughes Fire broke out north of Los Angeles, forcing some 50,000 residents to evacuate. This came as California lawmakers approved a $2.5 billion package to aid wildfire relief efforts. A federal judge in Seattle temporarily blocked Trump's executive order limiting birthright citizenship. The judge called the order unconstitutional after hearing a challenge by 4 Democrat-led states. Joining us now to discuss the court ruling on birthright citizenship is Jeremy Rosenthal, trial attorney and founding partner at Rosenthal, Calif, and Therian. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you here. Now, Trump's executive order is an interpretation of the 14th Amendment's citizenship clause, arguing that the current largely accepted understanding is incorrect, that simply being born here doesn't automatically make you a citizen. Now, if this goes up to the Supreme Court, what will the justices have to look at to determine whether it's a well-founded interpretation?
Well, they're going to look at the language of the 14th Amendment. There's not a lot of case law that's on this, and that's because we've never really had to have this debate. It's always been fairly well settled. Reading directly from the 14th Amendment, it says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. It's hard to really argue with a straight face that means anything other than if you were born here, you're a U.S. citizen. The Trump administration is trying to latch onto the language and to the subject of the jurisdiction. But I don't know that they have a lot of support that means that your parents have to have been in the country legally.
And what role might legal precedent play if the Supreme Court does take up the case?
It's always important. The last case to address this, though, was in 1898. So all of these arguments are frankly and candidly somewhat new. So we're basically sort of looking at this and trying to just trying to use the plain language. You hear a lot of jurists, a lot of judges who say, look, we're not going to write the law from the bench. The law says what it means and it means what it says. We're not going to start digging at sources outside the law unless we really have to, unless these things are unclear. And to give sort of an analog, this judicial or this executive order, I don't know what Donald Trump's overarching strategy is. He's had quite a few of these executive orders, and maybe he's trying to draw attention away from other ones, knowing that some of them are going to have a big challenge. This executive order wouldn't be a lot different than Barack Obama or Joe Biden saying that the Second Amendment means we can come and take your weapons from you. There's not a lot of functional difference from it. The plain language, I think, is something that the judge in Seattle really focused on today. He said it was blatantly unconstitutional. It was a bad first day for the Justice Department in trying to advocate their position in this case.
Now, besides having the Supreme Court uphold his position, would amending the Constitution be the only other way to have Trump's executive order become the law of the land?
To have the executive order, yes, you would have to amend the Constitution, which is a very arduous process, and I don't think you would be able to get there. You have to have the states ratify that, and I don't think you're going to have the numbers to do that. What a cleaner fix would be probably some legislation. Think of it like this. The way that the Constitution works is we have articles which grant the government really sweeping authority and power, and then we draw that back with the Bill of Rights, and most of the amendments to the Constitution limit the government's rights and give rights back to the people. A lot of things are directed by the executive, the president. A lot of them are to be directed by Congress through our representatives. Executive orders, they sort of are kind of occupy this sort of weird space that's kind of in the middle, where Congress doesn't speak or the courts don't speak. The executive can issue an order. Donald Trump can say, okay, all American government map makers have to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. He can do that. He can release JFK files. He can do things like that in absence of legislation. If they want to address immigration, that's typically done through legislation. The concern is that people are coming to the country illegally, having children, and then trying to piggyback on the fact that their children are citizens to say, look, I need to be a citizen too now because my children are here. The legislative fix would be to maybe try to address that issue and try to say, well, okay, if you have a child who is a citizen, here are the rules for how you have to become a citizen. And it's already difficult. My understanding is that you can't apply for that unless or until your child is 21 years old. So I think it's difficult to begin with, but that is a far easier fix than amending the U.S. Constitution.
Now, expanding on that, to change our requirements on citizenship could have huge implications on national and international levels. How would you describe the magnitude of Trump's interpretation of the 14th Amendment?
It's unspeakable. The way, if you read the executive order, he is saying that if your parents essentially were not here lawfully, then your citizenship is in question. That means people who have lived in America 40, 50, 60 years, have been raised and have thought their entire lives that they were U.S. citizens, are suddenly going to be subject to some type of immigration proceeding, or have their citizenship questioned if they travel, or have any type of legal issues or criminal issues. So it is titanic and seismic if this were to be upheld. But again, 22 states have filed suit to stop it. And like I said, the judge called it, he said, in 4 decades, I don't know that I've ever seen the Department of Justice take a position quite this far out there. So they didn't have a good first day as far as that goes.
Jeremy Rosenthal, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a great day.
The Abortion Survivors Act failed to proceed in the Senate. Senator James Lankford, along with Republican colleagues, speak in response. NTD correspondent Jason Blair is in the Capitol building now, where the talks were just held. Good evening, Jason. What is the latest from the senators?
Yeah, Senator Langford said the fight will still continue. That's after, as you said, the Abortion Survivors Act did not pass in the Senate. Now, basically, that act would give protection. Say there's some kind of a botched abortion and a baby is indeed born, that this infant would have the same rights, get the same kind of care and protection as any other infant being born in a hospital. So this act needed 60 votes to proceed in the Senate. It got 52 yeses, 47 noes, with all Senate Republicans voting yes, all Senate Democrats voting no on it. And then basically earlier this afternoon, Senator Langford did comment on this. Here's what he said.
We think most often about a mistake made by a doctor takes the life of an individual. This is a mistake made by the doctor that actually saves the life of an individual. And so the question is, now what? It's been interesting yesterday on the debate on the floor, and then the day before, even as Democrats came out to be able to say this is unnecessary when we know that this occurs by the hundreds.
So some arguments against the bill were basically that there are already laws that protect this kind of thing, so it's unnecessary. Also, there were some arguments that doctors don't need more regulation, more barriers to effectively do their job. Now, also during the talk, Senator Langford brought in some abortion survivors. One lady said she was able to live because a nurse defied orders to leave this woman in the hospital, and basically this nurse took her home and she was able to live.
And Jason, did the senators mention anything about what's next?
Yeah, they did say they want to continue talking with Senate Democrats. Langford said that they do believe they can make some progress with this. He said that privately, one Senate Democrat told him that he does actually agree with a lot of the text on the bill, but it was a hard vote because there was a lot of interpretation going around on social media regarding this act, so it was really tough for them to vote on it. But actually related also, there was a version of this bill that did pass the House back in 2023. At that time, it did not make it into the Senate, and there have been versions of this before in the Senate a couple years ago. So we'll just have to see if a new version of this pops up, and perhaps it will be more bipartisan. We'll have to see what happens with that. Back to you.
All right, Jason, thanks for those updates. President Trump this week requiring all federal agencies to get their employees back to working in the office full time. What are some of the economic ramifications of his decision? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear what people are saying.
Trump is now deciding to bring all federal employees back to working on site full time. What are your thoughts on that?
On the whole, it's probably smart. Government stuff, you don't want anyone getting into the transmissions over the email or whatever.
I thought it was a great idea. I think people work together when they are together physically.
If you're getting paid to work, it's better to be in office, especially if you're dealing with the government.
It's all about efficiency and work, and you got to be at work to get your job done.
I own a company. You don't do what you do, you're fired. Next.
I just keep thinking back into education and my, going into COVID times, to run a government on Zoom, that's crazy.
A lot of people are expecting a mass exodus of federal employees in the wake of Trump's decision, which is very much in line with what the Doge is trying to achieve. So with all that said, what do you think about the ramification of that? Do you think it's a good thing, or do you think it's a bad thing?
If it doesn't work for you to not work from home, then everybody is welcome to find employment elsewhere.
Who's going to be leaving because of this? I don't know. But on the whole, smaller government is better.
I think it's a good thing, and the ramification is going to be a more streamlined, less bureaucracy.
I think the government's too big. There's too many people working for it. So I think if there's people quitting because they don't want to go into the office and work, they probably weren't doing that a good, working remote.
Any business that doesn't do within its means and is red and black goes out of business. If you're not self-sufficient and you're making money, your business is dead. So we're at, 37 trillion now, or 38? So I'd say we're getting pretty close to getting dead.
D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser is now openly supporting Trump's measure, basically saying that this could potentially help revitalizing D.C.'s economy by bringing more people back into the city and supporting small businesses. So what are your thoughts on that? How do you think this measure can relate to the general dynamic of the nation's economy?
Well, not being from the area, I do see validity in her view.
People people coming into the office, commuting, going on lunch breaks, dinner with coworkers, it's definitely going to pump into the economy.
You're going to have 100,000, 10,000, whatever the numbers of people coming here on a daily basis, which means they're going to buy gas, they're going to use restaurants, they're going to put money back into the city. So it's a smart move for her because right now, look around, all these buildings are dead.
Phone-free classrooms in New York. Governor Kathy Hochul announcing a proposal that would ban cell phone use in K-12 public schools. NTD's Chris Spears has the story.
The governor of New York introduced a budget proposal that would ban the use of cell phones in K-12 classrooms throughout the school day. It also includes other internet-connected devices like smartwatches and tablets, prohibiting their use in all school settings like lunchrooms and study halls. Hochul outlining the basis of her proposal at a press conference.
A war is being waged for our children's minds. It's that profound. Kids are being besieged with addictive algorithms, toxic social media, and cell phones that just can be so manipulative that it becomes addictive like a drug.
The proposal requires schools ensure parents have a way to contact their children on school days. Schools would create their own implementation plans and receive funding for pouches, cubbies, and other phone storage systems.
And I believe we'll be judged harshly if we don't look at the data that is so overwhelming of the negative impact of social media and cell phones on children's developmental abilities to function as not just as kids, but ultimately as adults. And how so many times that these social media platforms have had a profoundly negative impact on our children's mental health.
Some parents are concerned they might not be able to reach their children when the ban goes into effect. Law enforcement says it's necessary to keep children safe in emergency situations. The superintendent of the New York State Police explained how students need to focus on instructions from staff in those situations.
Students may instinctively reach for their phones first instead of focusing on those instructions that are being conveyed. Instructions that are intended to help them get to a safe place. And they may unknowingly text or post inaccurate information to social media and cause confusion, quite possibly to parents or to emergency responders.
If passed, New York would join 9 other states with similar laws, including California, Florida, Louisiana, and Virginia. There seems to be bipartisan support for this type of policy. Raj Goyal is head of a pro-phone ban group that urged Hochul to propose this bill.
There is a rapid realization from the parent community, from the teaching community, from the education community that we got a problem with this generation, and it's not their fault. And in fact, in today's paper is a brand new study that shows the rates of self-harm and aggression and depression for 13-year-olds is significantly more than even 17-year-olds. And we know the culprit, it's phones.
Coming up in the NFL, will Lamar Jackson win his second straight MVP? Dave Martin joins us to break down the 5 finalists when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on today, but let's start in the NFL as the league is down to 5 finalists for the MVP award. Who would you say is the front runner?
Yeah, I think it's really down to 3 players at this point. You got Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley, and of course Lamar Jackson, who's won already this award twice already. Now Joe Burrow, he had a great season, but his team really didn't make the playoffs, so I don't see him getting it. Jared Goff, another great season too, who led this team to a best record in the NFL. Those are the other 2 finalists. But really, Josh Allen, he led the Bills to a 5th straight division title, despite their team letting go of some really critical players in the offseason, including both of his starting receivers, yet he has a great season. They win the division again. Now, Saquon Barkley, man, for more than 2,000 yards, the 8th highest total in NFL history, plus his team went 14-3, 3rd best record in the league. But Lamar Jackson was incredible this year. 41 touchdown passes thrown against just 4 interceptions, plus he ran for over 900 yards and he passed for more than 4,000. Now, sometimes if you're the reigning MVP, it seems like there's a higher bar for you to repeat the next year, but I think he had the best season of anyone, though.
Well, Jackson's teammate Mark Andrews made his first public comments in Sunday's loss, where he was credited with a dropped pass that could have sent the game to overtime. What did he say?
Yeah, let me read part of it for you. This is posted on his Instagram account. He said, quote, It's impossible to adequately express how I feel. I'm absolutely gutted by what happened on Sunday. I'm devastated for my teammates, my coaches, and Ravens fans. I thank everyone who has shown me and our team genuine support these past several days. Now, watching the game, you really had to feel bad for him. I mean, the Ravens were trailing, but they had the momentum in the second half. And then he has the ball punched out of his grasp after a nice catch and run there. It's officially a fumble, but it was critical. And this was his first turnover in 5 years. That's amazing. The Ravens, though, credit them, they still mounted another comeback. They scored with 90 seconds left to pull within 2 points. All they need is a 2-point conversion to tie it. And on the play, they throw it to Andrews, who's trying to catch and run into the end zone, but he just cannot quite come with the ball, and it's pretty much game over. Now, let me just say, even if they tie it right there, the Bills still have 90 seconds to come back, which is a lot of time for them to get into field goal range. It certainly would have made it interesting, though, had he caught it.
Looking at college football news, the TV ratings for Monday night's championship game were down 12% from last year's game. Is it surprising considering these were two blue blood programs?
You know, I think on the surface it was surprising. Notre Dame, Ohio State, they've got a national following. Each of those programs has won multiple national titles. And just to be clear, 22 million tuned in Monday night as compared to 25 million who tuned in last year. I think part of the reason ratings were down, though, was the inauguration that day kind of dominated on TV watching. There was plenty of interest over what was going to happen with a new president on day one, and as we both know, that was an all-day event. It probably didn't help that the game was kind of over by the third quarter. Ohio State had that 31-7 lead. Now, as it turned out, Notre Dame actually made a run to make it interesting, but even so, this was not a back-and-forth battle. And that's been a recent theme, though. The average margin of victory in the last 7 national title games is just over 25 points. Obviously, a closer game is something people want to see.
Well, shifting gears to tennis, American Madison Keys upset Iga Swiatek yesterday to advance to the finals of the Australian Open, where she'll face top-ranked Aryna Sabalenka.
Yeah, it was quite a win for Keys. She faced match point in the third set while Swiatek was serving 6-5. Swiatek, though, hit a backhand into the net, and then she eventually double faulted on her serve to lose the game, sent it to a tiebreaker, which Keys then won. So Keys will face Sabalenka for the title. Now, Sabalenka is not only ranked #1 in the world, she's also the 2-time defending champion at this event here at the Australian Open. No one has won 3 straight titles since Martina Hingis did in the late 1990s. Now that match is going to take place, well, Saturday morning, U.S. time anyway. Meanwhile, tonight and tomorrow morning, we've got the men's semifinals. Novak Djokovic is going to place second-ranked Alexander Zverev in one, and then you've got Jannik Sinner facing American Ben Shelton in the other. So if Djokovic is going to win it again, this would be his record-extending 11th. He'd have to be #2 and maybe even #1 Saturday or Sunday morning, actually, to do it. So it would be very tough for him.
Well, Davis, always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.